Check out FlipsideGaming.com for all your gaming needs. Use the promo code HEROES for 10% off any purchase over $10. If you use that promo code between now and January 28th, you will automatically be entered in a drawing to win a Ravnica Allegiance booster box. Check out the description below for details. Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to the final day of Ravnica Allegiance previews. Tomorrow we're going to get the rest of the set and begin our full set review, but today we have a few more cards to look at. We're going to recap and analyze everything that was revealed over the last 24 hours or so. And as always, if you're curious about the source of the card, check out the description below. You'll find which content creator presented which card. Just a quick reminder before we get started, also in the description below, you'll find a few ways to support the channel, one of which is our Patreon page. That's linked down there. You're also going to find products on Amazon, and anything you buy on Amazon, once you go through that first link, no matter what it is, we'll get a small percentage for the channel. Finally, Flipside Gaming still offering a promo code for our viewers. Hopefully you can save a little cash while you support the channel, but as always, thank you not only to the folks that look at those links, but to each and every one of you. Y'all make the channel what it is. Let's get into today's cards. We're going to begin today by looking at some Planeswalker deck exclusive cards. Now, we have seen these cards previously from a leak, so I don't want to spend a ton of time on the cards we've talked about previously. If you want to hear my full thoughts, just check out the playlist. There is a video where we talked about these when they were leaked initially in Russian. Now, we do have a few more details this time around. There were pieces of the cards that were obscured, so we'll talk about those briefly, but I won't go into the regular detail that I typically do with these cards. Just a reminder, though, Planeswalker deck cards are technically standard legal, but you will not find them in regular booster packs of Ravnica Allegiance. They will only be found in the particular Planeswalker decks. In this case, we're going to look at cards first from the Dovin deck. Now, even though I'm not going into a full review on these cards today, I'll let you know generally, Planeswalker deck cards are designed specifically for casual play. Sometimes they're interesting in Commander, but they are costed in such a way that you most likely will not want to play them in Standard. There's nothing within these new cards that makes me feel any differently about that. So let's look at Dovin, Architect of Law. We talked about this one previously, but we didn't have the official name until now. Secondly is Dovin's Dismissal. Again, we have the official translated name. Now, the last one here, Dovin's Automaton. This one, we could not see the power and toughness. That was obscured. We now know it's a 3/3. Doesn't really change my opinion of the card any. This card we have not yet seen. This is the fourth card in the Dovin deck that can only be found in the Planeswalker deck. It's Elite Arrestor. 1 white, human soldier. It's a common designation. Blue 1, tap target creature, 0/3. This would be a good limited card if it was in the limited environment. Since it's not, I'll just simply say I think this will be good out of the box, especially if you're playing against the other deck. It's going to do a little work for you there. Again, not a card you're going to see necessarily show up in Standard or anything like that. Now, here's something that was kind of interesting in the article about these Planeswalker decks. They showed the deck list for Dovin, and there was a card in there from Return to Ravnica. That's this one, Concordia Pegasus. Now, they specified that the other cards were exclusive to the Planeswalker deck, but they did not mention this one, so I'm assuming this is going to get a reprint in Ravnica Allegiance. This is not a true preview yet, but there's a good chance it's in the set, so we'll talk about it briefly. White 1, Pegasus. Common, I think it would remain common. 1/3 with flying. Yeah, not a lot to say about this card. It's a curve filler for limited purposes. It's just fine. It's not amazing. You won't always use it. But if you need something in the 2 spot, which is going to hold the ground for a while, or hold the air a little bit in this case, then yeah, it's going to be just fine. A 1/3 flyer for 2 is okay, but nothing special. Okay, here's 3 of the cards from the Domri deck now that we have seen previously, but again, we're finding out their full names for real now. Domri City Smasher, Domri's Notarog. We couldn't see the power toughness on that one before. We now know it's a 5/2, pretty low toughness there. And finally, Ragefire. Ragefire, we couldn't see the complete card, so we are learning a little more about it. It's a red and 1. We weren't sure of that casting cost before. It's a sorcery. We did know that. It deals 3 damage to target creature. We weren't sure if it was target creature or all creatures. Well, now we know. 2 casting costs, 3 to target creature. It's going to be good in this environment if you're just playing against the other Planeswalker deck, for example. It will be very good, actually. But again, can't really evaluate it for limited since it's not in the set, and it's not quite good enough, of course, to cross over into Standard. Here's a card we did not see, though, that is exclusive to the Domri deck. It's Charging War Boar. This is going to cost a green, a red, and 1. It's a boar, designated as an uncommon with haste, 3/1. As long as you control a Domri Planeswalker, and that can be any Domri, not just the one that comes in this deck, Charging Boar gets +1/+1 and has Trample. Again, nothing really exciting here. It wouldn't even really be a good limited card if it was in the limited environment. Out of the deck, though, especially if you can get Domri in play, it's okay. I mean, many times it will trade down. Maybe it can do a point of damage or two in the process. Nothing amazing, but again, if you're just playing casually, it's alright. Okay, now on to the previews proper. These are cards that you will find in packs of Ravnica Allegiance, beginning with Forbidding Spirit. This costs 2 white and 1. It's a Spirit Cleric, uncommon 3/3. When this enters the battlefield into your next turn, creatures can attack you or a Planeswalker you control unless their controller pays 2 for each of those creatures. I'll say this for limited purposes. I like the economy here. A 3/3 for 3, that's not bad. And when it does enter the battlefield, you get an interesting effect. Your opponent may have to choose. Are they going to attack you, or are they going to hold back and maybe play another card? And that decision might slow them down a little bit for a turn. Then it's business as usual after that, although you get a nice bit of board presence with a 3/3. I kind of wonder if we're going to see flicker effects sometime within this standard environment, just because there's so many interesting enters the battlefield effects that we found not only in this set, but also in Guilds of Ravnica. So I do think maybe this is a little foreshadowing. Maybe this card gets better in the future. Right now, I don't really see it crossing over into standard. Another place you might think about playing it, though, is Commander in a Pillow Fort deck. I mean, there's cards that do this type of thing way better, obviously, but it could complement that strategy a little bit. Next, we have a German language preview card, Rally to Battle. This one's an uncommon, a white and 3. Instant. Creatures you control get +1/+3 until end of turn. Untap those creatures. Nice little combat trick for limited. Not a lot else to say about it. If your opponent thinks your shields are down, think again. If you have 4 mana untapped, they better not be attacking into that open mana, because you could really surprise them untapping everything, giving everything +1/+3 till end of turn. Or maybe you just have a wide strategy. You're playing a lot of Afterlife or something like that. You have creatures in the air that are small. You can maybe go in and try to close out a game with this. This isn't something you want to get crazy with, but like a one of in a deck, as long as you have a lot of small creatures or something like that and you're trying to go wide, yeah, it feels like it could be pretty good in draft or sealed. Not a high draft pick or anything. You'll be able to grab these maybe in the middle of the pack and we'll be fine. Resolute Watchdog, 1 white, Hound, uncommon, Defender, 1/3, pay 1, sack this. Target creature you control gains indestructible until end of turn. Pretty good limited card here. I'm not necessarily trying to prioritize this in my first couple draft picks or anything like that, but if I can grab it in the middle of the pack, I'll take this and be pretty happy with it. I think running like one of these in a deck is pretty good. You just want this to be able to protect one of your better creatures at any given time, especially if you have an evasive creature like a flyer or something you're trying to ride to victory. This can make it that much more difficult for your opponent to deal with that problem. So once this is on the battlefield, it can protect your best thing. Your opponent's got to think now, how can they get rid of the Watchdog, or at least force you to activate it so that they can get hopefully another spell to get rid of the thing they need to get rid of. And that might not always happen for them in time. Now granted, exile effects of course will get around this and such, but this is a card that can do a little work for you in sealed and draft. Next we have another German language preview, Sentinels Mark. It's a white and 1 enchantment aura flash enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +1/+2 and vigilance. Addendum, if you cast this spell during your main phase, enchanted creature gains lifelink until end of turn. 2 casting cost spell that's going to buff the creature, give it vigilance, and also for 1 turn give it lifelink. There's a lot there for 2 mana, especially considering this has flash. It might be able to protect a creature on the fly sometimes. But you gotta be careful because there's no way to protect the creature or the enchantment if someone attempts to 2-for-1 you with a removal spell or something. So that could very well happen. You can play this card in limited. I'm going to allow it. I'm letting you do it. But if you do, be really careful. Just think about your timing. Play this if your opponent's out of cards. Play it if they're tapped out. Make sure you're going to get at least 1 good use out of the card. Now, it does have flash, so you can also use it defensively. That's pretty cool. Or if you're using it offensively, just pick your moment. Just be real careful with this card, but it can still be pretty good. Again, I would say no more than 1 copy in a draft or sealed deck. That will do just fine. It might not always make your cut. Sometimes you will have better things. Sky Tether, 1 white, enchantment aura, uncommon, enchant creature. Enchanted creature has defender and loses flying. Pretty solid card for limited here. Now, sometimes you just have something in the air that's blocking your path, and especially if I'm in the Orzhov colors with all my little flyers, I might need to clear that path. This card will do that for just 1 mana. I like that a lot. Or maybe I'm just getting beat down by a trample creature I'm concerned with. This will kind of put an end to that too. Although it's still going to gum up the ground. Whatever I put this on can still block, of course. But the fact that it pulls it out of the air is a big deal. And if I'm in Orzhov colors, I might prioritize this a little bit when I see it passed to me in a draft. Otherwise, though, I might still pick a copy up just to have in my deck regardless of what colors I'm in. Eyes Everywhere. Blue and 2, enchantment uncommon at the beginning of your upkeep, scry 1. Blue and 5, exchange control of Eyes Everywhere and target non-land permanent. Activate this ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery. Okay, this is a really interesting card. I actually like the design here quite a bit. Let's talk limited first. I think it's a great limited card. 3 casting cost, scry every turn. You kind of have me pretty much there just with that part of the card. Later on, I can exchange this for another permanent. Now, that's going to mean a couple things. It's not always going to be Magical Christmas Land. You're going to exchange this and everyone's happy and you win the game. What's going to happen a lot of the time is you're going to play this because you need to scry, and then your opponent knows it's there, so they're going to play a little softer. Not that that's a bad thing. They'll just hold back maybe their best permanent, and that's definitely not a bad thing for you, right? However, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to grab their great bomb and win the game with it either, so just keep that in mind. The second thing you got to remember is if they have blue mana, then they can just switch back. So that's the funny thing about this card. I mean, you could steal something for a turn, they could take it back. You have to kind of get the timing right, especially when it comes to when things are tapped or have summoning sickness. It's not a magic bullet by any means. With that being said, though, I still think it's a really good card. Just scrying might be good enough. Slowing down your opponent might be good enough. And if you play this later in the game, they might have already committed to a big bomb creature or something, and you could grab it and have a big turn. And especially if they don't have blue mana, this gets a lot better. So I really like it here. It could be a relatively high uncommon draft pick for me, definitely. In Standard, I think it has some problems. It's a little expensive to activate the ability, and I do think there's going to be a number of decks running blue in the format, so it doesn't feel like it's going to be that great against another deck with access to blue. Now, in Commander, it's kind of interesting, especially if you can pick on somebody that doesn't have blue in their mana base. That could be cool. I would definitely try it out there, maybe with a Zedru deck or something like that. Gateway Sneak, blue and 2, Vedalken Rogue, uncommon 1/3. Whenever a gate enters the battlefield under your control, Gateway Sneak can't be blocked this turn. Whenever Gateway Sneak deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So it has that built-in curiosity effect. Now, earlier in the week, we were talking about how sometimes you have to fall back on your plan and draft. If things aren't going your way, you might just have to lean on a 4 or 5 color good stuff plan at some point and pick up as many gates as you can. And then these Gate Matters cards will almost fall into your lap, and you might get some good power out of them from time to time and have a decent deck. So that is very true for this card. However, this card's not necessarily bad, even if I only have a few gates. Look at it this way, 1/3 for 3. That's not astounding, but it's fine. It's going to gum up the ground a little bit. Some decks will appreciate that. At some point, if I play a gate and I'm able to attack with this, okay, now it replaced itself. That's not bad for 3 mana. Later, if I play a second gate, I'm even up a card, even better. So it doesn't take a lot to make this pretty good. So I do see myself playing this not only in an all-in gate deck, but perhaps maybe an Azorius build here or there too. It might not always make your cut, but I think it's a fine limited card generally. The other thing I would say about this card though, if it's in your deck and you have a lot of mana going on and you don't need to play a gate when you draw it, hang on to that gate. Later on you might have the Gateway Sneak and it could come in handy. Also, this is another gate card if you like to play Commander gate decks. Persistent Petitioners. This is a blue and 1 common human advisor 1/3. Pay 1 and tap. Target player puts the top card of their library into their graveyard. Notice it is target player, so you could mill yourself here. Tap 4 untapped advisors you control. Target player puts the top 12 cards of their library into their graveyard. A deck can have any number of cards named Persistent Petitioners. Wow, okay. Let's talk limited first with this one. I mean, 40 card decks. Can you mill somebody out? Yeah, if you had a few copies of this, you might be able to pull it off. Here's what I'm thinking, though. Let's talk sealed and then we'll talk draft separately. In sealed, it might be hard to pull this off to get to the point where you have 4 advisors. We don't know what all the commons look like in this set yet, how many advisors are out there that you might be able to have in your sealed pool. If you have enough and you have a copy, if you're lucky, 2 copies of this, maybe, just maybe you can pull it off, but we just don't know how practical that's going to be yet until we see the full set. Draft, it becomes a little more practical because now you could try to grab all the advisors and especially try to grab as many of these as you can. If that's the case, you could go all in on a mill deck and it might actually be good, but it's a little fragile too. I mean, 4 advisors, keeping them alive doesn't feel like it's going to be super easy, but in the meantime, if you have some copies of this, even milling 1 card at a time does start to add up. If you had 2 of these in play, for example, 2 cards a turn, that does start to pressure your opponent a little bit as long as you have another game plan going on too. So I do think it's very possible to sit down at the draft table and be in a situation where you start grabbing lots of advisors and try to go all in on this plan, and it might actually work. So, hey, it sounds like fun. I want to try it out. We'll have to see again how many other common advisors there are and what that deck could look like. Now, beyond that, standard, could you build around this? You know somebody's going to want to try. The only problem is I think you might be able to win a game one, perhaps, but then you have things like Sorcerer's Spyglass to worry about. I mean, that will just shut this whole strategy down if this is your core strategy. So I think realistically, unfortunately, there's too many obstacles in standard. You could try to protect this. You could throw in some artifact removal at post board to try to protect the combo. But I think at some point you start to water down the combo too much. And especially considering you need to keep all these creatures alive, it just feels really, really, really fragile. What about Commander? Well, Commander, it's a little awkward. Yes, you can put any number of these in your deck. I mean, you could run a whole bunch of these. However, you also have 100-card decks that you're up against, and this is only going to really hit one person at a time. Feels a little slow there, honestly. Clamor Shaman. It's a red and 2. Goblin Shaman, uncommon 1/1 with Riot. When this attacks, target creature an opponent controls can't block this turn. Alright, now we're talking. This is a good limited card. I like these cards that nullify a blocker, and the fact that this has haste is really strong. Now, it doesn't have to have haste. There are situations where you might want to give it the +1/+1 counter. I mean, a 1/1 is very fragile, especially for 3. But I think most of the time, you just put this on the table with haste and attack in and hopefully do a lot of damage, maybe even at times close out a game. Now, if you're ahead, you might be able to slam the door on a game. If you're behind, though, sure, the +1/+1 counter might be the right option. Now, attacking in, nullifying that best blocker, whether you do it with haste or you do it later, it's just a great ability for Drafter Sealed. This is a relatively high pick uncommon for me. If I'm going all in on an aggro build, like Rakdos, it will be great. It's not going to be bad in Gruul either, where your creatures might be a little bigger and a little slower, but this can still help you a lot in combat. Cavalcade of Calamity. This costs a red and 1. It's an enchantment uncommon. Whenever a creature you control with power 1 or less attacks, this will deal 1 damage to the player or planeswalker that creature is attacking. It's a cheap enchantment, although I don't love throwing out enchantments that do nothing on their own necessarily. But if you have some creatures to attack in with, this could kind of add up. So let me cut to the chase. Talk standard first. Is this even possible to make work in standard? Maybe. Maybe I would want to test this in the Mardu Aristocrats deck. Perhaps it's using some creatures with Afterlife. I sack creatures for benefit. I get these 1/1 flyers. As the game goes on, I can put pressure with the 1/1 flyers. Getting this ability out there at some point will just add to that pressure. Now, is that better than going with something that is going to buff all your creatures, like the artifact we saw yesterday that gave +1/+1 to all your multicolor creatures? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, that only costs 2 as well and is colorless, so maybe this just gets outclassed by that. But if you were using monocolored creatures, perhaps some of the tokens that we saw from the previous set, maybe something like a March of the Multitudes into this, or maybe something that creates colorless Thopters. I don't know. It gets a little interesting if nothing else. I'd at least want to test it. Again, I'm not convinced that using this in lieu of Anthem effects is going to be better, but it's something to think about anyway, especially if you happen to be in red. In limited, I think this is good in certain builds. Obviously, if you don't have a lot of small creatures, you're going to ignore this. But if you do have a lot of Afterlife creatures, maybe again, Mardu colors or something like that, or you could even just splash for this, then it might be worth it. It could accelerate the clock a little bit. I'd at least want to try it out in a number of builds. I don't think it's a super high draft pick unless I'm already maybe going down the Orzhov path and I see this show up, I might grab it. I might not start off in pack 1 trying to take this super early, but I do think there are decks that will want this. Many will still skip it though. Gatebreaker Ram. Alright, here's another gate card for you. Green and 2. Sheep is the creature type, uncommon 2/2. This will get +1/+1 for each gate you control. As long as you control 2 or more gates, this will get Vigilance and Trample. So earlier we already discussed the idea of sometimes drafting into a multicolored deck with a lot of gates. This would be phenomenal in that kind of deck. However, this is another card that's not necessarily bad if you only have a few gates in your deck. A 2/2 for 3 is not really where you want to be, but if you think consistently this could be a 3/3 for 3, that's not horrible economy. And if you think at least part of the time it could be a 4/4 Vigilance Trample for 3, well, now we're talking. That's ahead of where you should be for 3 mana, definitely. So I do think a lot of decks might just run this even if they're not all in on gates. Now, if you don't have any gates in your deck, I would say skip this one. You'll find something better at the 3 spot. or if you only have one gate, it's probably not worth the risk. This won't be for all limited decks, clearly, but sometimes you'll be happy you got it. And here's another gate commander card as well. Regenesis, 2 green and 3. It's an instant uncommon. Return up to 2 target permanent cards from your graveyard to your hand. I actually like this card a lot. I do think it might see some standard play, perhaps in a Bant control deck or even a Bant Nexus deck. Taking some of the permanents back from your graveyard at instant speed. That's the key here. It's an instant. Even for 5 mana, I think is pretty decent. So I think it does see at least a little bit of standard play. In limited, the card will be phenomenal for you. If you get a chance to play with it, go for it. This is another pretty high uncommon draft pick for me. Knight of the Last Breath. Black, white, and 5. It's a giant knight, uncommon 4/4. Pay 3 and sacrifice another non-token creature, and you get to create a 1/1 white and black spirit creature token with flying. Afterlife 3. Wow, okay. You're paying for this, but it's well worth it in a game of Draft or Sealed. It's got some decent board presence with the 4/4, but it's all about the abilities for me. Being able to take an obsolete creature, turning it into a flyer when I need to swarm is pretty cool. Maybe the creature's going to die anyway. I can use it as a blocker, then sacrifice it for the 3 mana. And then eventually when this does die, if it dies, you're going to get 3 1/1 flyers. That is actually pretty impressive. You can really start pushing the damage across with a card like this. This clearly wants to be in an Orzhov Afterlife build, but you know what? The card itself is decent enough that I could see myself splashing the other color and playing it in a different build. I think it's actually that good. It will be better in Orzhov though, and it is a little expensive. Hopefully you have a way to accelerate your mana just a little bit to get there sooner than later. But ultimately, I'll be happy to run this in Draft or Sealed. Macabre Mockery. Red, black, and 2. It's an instant uncommon. Put target creature card from an opponent's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. It gets +2/+0 and gains haste until end of turn. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. Okay, so this is basically a threatened effect, but instead of taking something from the opponent's battlefield for the turn, you take it from the graveyard and then you sacrifice it at the next end step. It gets a little buff of +2/+0. Of course, it will get haste, so you can attack in with it. But it is an instant, so I could use it as a combat trick defensively if I need to, and I do like that flexibility. What about standard? Do I use this card? I'm a little shaky there because of the colors it's in. The way I look at this, if I'm in these colors, I should be playing Lava Coils, I should be playing Vraska's Contempt. I'm exiling things, and if all is going well, I don't have a lot of targets in the graveyard that I care about. Also, you don't know what kind of deck you're going to come up against. I mean, if you go against a Bant Nexus deck, there might not be a whole lot of creatures, if any, in there, right? So you are dependent on what your opponent's playing, and that's a little awkward for me. I don't like that variance. In Limited, though, I'm happy to run this card. I do think it's a relatively high pick uncommon in a draft. It's just very flexible, like I mentioned before. And whether I'm using it offensively or defensively, I do think there's enough value here to be happy with the 4 mana casting cost. And remember, another way to look at this card is perhaps my opponent has a creature that has an awesome tap ability in their graveyard. I might be able to surprise them by pulling that card out. It has haste, remember. I might be able to tap and get this ability to occur. So this card could give you more benefit than just within combat. So you always want to pay attention to exactly what is in your opponent's graveyard when you have this in your hand. Also, maybe I play this in Commander. There could be some juicy targets out there in graveyards. Sunder Shaman, here's another part of the double color uncommon cycle. This costs 2 green, 2 red, Giant Shaman 5/5. This can't be blocked by more than one creature. Whenever this deals combat damage to a player, destroy target artifact or enchantment that player controls. Let's talk limited first. This is not a sideboard card for artifacts and enchantments. This is a solid creature. 5/5 for 4 and cannot be blocked by more than one creature, so it can't be held back by a 3/3 and 2/2, for example. That's phenomenal. The downside here is the color requirements. 2 red, 2 green. Not every deck is going to be able to swing that in Draft or Sealed. If you can swing it, play this card. If you don't think you can consistently get it out turn 4, turn 5, or turn 6, okay, then maybe you skip it. Later in the game, the card's not going to be as good. But if you can pull this off in the middle portion of a game, it's going to be backbreaking. Your opponent is going to either need a large creature to hold this back, or they're going to need a removal spell real quick. If not, they're taking 5, they're taking 5. There also might be a combo to give it menace even for a turn. That could be really fun. And aside from that, if they have artifacts or enchantments, they might be losing those too. So that's just the cherry on top. Ultimately, I would say this is a high pick uncommon in draft. However, I realize the double color may hold you back a little bit depending on how your draft's going or how you're starting off. You might not want to commit to that too soon, and that totally makes sense. But if you're ready to commit, this is going to be a solid card for you, no doubt. Draft or Sealed, you're going to love this thing. What about Standard? I think this might see Standard play, believe it or not. I don't think a lot of decks will have trouble casting this pretty consistently on like a turn 4, turn 5. And if that's the case, a 5/5 creature that again can't be double blocked, someone's going to have to deal with that thing. And you know what doesn't deal with it? Lava Coil, for example. Sure, there's other cards that will deal with it, Vraska's Contempt, whatever. But this does get around Lava Coil. That's pretty important. I think we see this in a Stompy deck. Collision Colossus. Here's an uncommon split card. Now let's look at the first side. It's an instant. Gruul color hybrid mana, red or green and 1. This will deal 6 damage to target creature with flying. Okay. Colossus. Green and red. Instant. Target player gets +4/+2 and gains trample until end of turn. Let's talk limited first. This is a really solid card and not just a sideboard card again here. If I'm playing a Gruul deck, I'm in these colors in some capacity, I think it's going to be good at some point to get something +4/+2 and trample at instant speed, mind you. At instant speed. That could be backbreaking if your opponent does not see that coming, and you can't play around this all day, right? So this could win you games sometimes. If you already have a large creature in play, attack in, your opponent tries to chump it, hit them with this, that could be game over sometimes. Now the other side is going to come in handy too if they happen to have an important flyer that you don't have another way of getting around. But again, don't board it in once you see flyers in game 1. This is a solid card no matter what's going on. What about Standard? I think it actually could see Standard play. Most likely out of sideboards though. The Colossus side is not as exciting in Standard. Could come in handy from time to time. It's nice that it's stapled onto Collision. But Collision's why I'm playing this in Standard. I'm going to side it in to deal with things like Niv-Mizzet, for example. And I do think that actually could be a reality in this next Standard. So this is one to keep an eye on for sure. Alright, we got another split card. This one is a rare though, and it's a French language preview. Repudiate and Replicate. That first side is 2 hybrid mana, blue or green each, instant, counter target activated ability or triggered ability. The other side is a blue, green, and 1 sorcery. Create a token that's a copy of a creature you control. Okay, let's talk limited. The Replicate, pretty good in Drafter Sealed, right? Copying a creature that you have could be very good, especially if you're trying to pull ahead on board state. You get a good creature out, now you got another copy of it. That's phenomenal. Every once in a while, the other side, the Repudiate side, might actually come in handy too. It's a nice little stifle effect. Never know when you might need that, right? So, yeah, I like the versatility. Could definitely be good in Drafter Sealed. It is a rare, so you won't see it a lot, and it should be good most of the time, right? So it is a decent early draft pick that doesn't lock you in too badly considering the casting cost of both of these sides of the cards. You could always splash for one color or the other. The hybrid mana also loosens things up nicely. What about Standard? I think it could see some Standard play too out of sideboards perhaps. I do think more so though because of the Repudiate side than the Replicate side in this case. Again, who knows? Replicate could come in handy. It's not very expensive. That's kind of nice. But I think for the most part, you're going to play this in a control build. It could be any blue-based control deck. It could be a band control deck. It could be a Nexus deck. But I think you might bring it in against certain matchups when you want that additional stifle ability in your deck. And also, you could even just throw this in a green deck. That's the nice part of the flexibility of the hybrid mana. Although I do think it will be better in a control build. Another thing you might see people brewing around when it comes to a card like this is perhaps a combo where there's a triggered effect that is hurting you. One example of that could be Chance for Glory, for example. Now, that's a long shot. Don't know if that deck could get there, but I could see people trying to figure that out, taking a card like Chance for Glory, trying to turn it off with a stifle effect so you don't lose the game, but still get all the benefit. That could actually be quite good if you could pull it off, right? But like I said, I think that's going to be difficult to solve. You never know, though. I've seen stranger things happen. So beyond that, I think this is also a fine commander card. I mean, stifle effects are always good, but copying a creature in commander when you have big, powerful creatures for only 3 mana is really not bad. Sphinx of the Guild Pact. 7 casting cost, artifact creature Sphinx, uncommon 5/5. Sphinx of the Guild Pact is all colors. Flying, hexproof from monocolored. This is actually a pretty good limited card. A little expensive at 7, and there might be better things when you start talking about 5, 6, 7, 8 casting cost cards in this set. But this one is not bad. If this is the option you have in Drafter Sealed, I think you're going to be okay with it. Many times this might be a higher pick uncommon for me. A 5/5 body in the air, so a lot of power and toughness with evasion. And the hexproof and the monocolored means that the monocolored removal spells can't target this thing. Now, there are multicolor spells that can get rid of it, of course, so it's not unstoppable or anything, but it's that much more difficult to deal with. And if you can get in a few attacks, That's a lot of damage adding up pretty quickly, and if your opponent can't find an answer, they could be in trouble. This is a workhorse draft or seal card for you as long as you can get it out in a timely manner. Alright, those are the preview cards for today. Tomorrow, we begin our full set review, beginning with the Azorius Guild. And then on Saturday, we're going to take a little break, do our market watch as we always do, and we'll continue the set review on Sunday. But until next time, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible through the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page, as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.